All right, good afternoon, everybody. Todd was in some contact with me a little bit earlier today, said he might be running late or maybe not even able to attend. We don't have a ton of people on the meeting just yet. Let me promote some people from the other side. Um, all right. So welcome everybody to today's the January 29th IBC Technical Advisory Group meeting. We do have Angela Hopp. She's a newly appointed tag chair, and I didn't get good communication out to you before this, so apologies, Angela. I was expecting Todd to be here today. Angela, would you mind maybe running this as the chair today, and then I can kind of shepherd us through the agenda?
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it. So, okay, yeah, I'm dandy.
All right, thank you. Um, and so we'll do a roll call real quick. I need to update the chair here. So Angela Haupt.
Here.
All right. I gotta make some quick changes here. And
Justin, I'll be
then
right back.
Roger Haringa's not here. I think I have some more updates to do on this roll call sheet, so apologies. Uh,
Hey, Justin, I just have to go to the restroom, but I am here, so I'll be really
okay.
quick. So,
Thank you, Hoyt. Joe Mayo.
Here.
Thank you. Che Fortaleza.
Here.
Thank you. Tim Woodard.
Here.
Thank you. Steve Belzak. Not seeing online. Let me check attendees. Not seeing. Lance Dahl. Not seeing online. Hoyt Jeter is here, but indisposed at the moment. Sean Karlstrom. Not seeing online. Todd Sullivan. Not seeing online. Bill Mybush. Not seeing online. Brian Horstman. Not seeing online. Josh Mergens. Not online. Trent Tinney. Not online. Michael Shaw. I'm not seeing online. Brett Conway. Not online. Michael Barth.
I'm here.
Thank you. Leah Summer. I'm not seeing online. Paul Clark.
Here.
Thank you. And Andy Leonto. I'm not seeing online. So with that, we don't have a quorum. We are shy two seats per quorum.
I'm back on.
Thank you, Hoyt. All right. So since we don't have quorum, we can't review and approve the agenda. And we can't review and approve minutes. I'll continue to monitor the attendees list. And if we establish quorum, I'll be sure to let the chair know, and we can maybe go back and do some formal action there. We are accumulating quite a few sets of minutes to approve due to lack of quorum. And so I guess before we move on, is the regular Thursday at 1 working for people? Is there a different day or time that, I guess the people who aren't here can't answer that question. So, but is there a different day that we could do, because we're not getting anything done meeting weekly at this point? All right, we'll leave it open-ended. I'll send an email out to folks and see if there's a better way or a better time that we can try to get some quorum going here.
I mean, Dustin, do the people answer back to you if they're not going to be able to make it, or do they just don't show up?
So in the past, before we switched to webinar format, we would get some notification if people accepted or declined the meeting. I do believe we're not getting the same communications when we do the webinar format. But Rosanna, if you don't mind popping on your mic real quick and maybe characterize that a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, not a problem. So normally when I would send out those invites in the past, some people would accept, some would deny, and then some would just not respond at all. But now with the webinar, like Dustin just characterized, I don't get any information back saying that people are going to attend or not. So that leaves us kind of hoping that we do have quorum.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'll send out a poll to the whole tag group to see if we can identify a better day time to work this out. Because, we've been meeting for, 5 weeks in a row now and not had any real movement. We've had good discussion, but we haven't been able to move anything. And I don't believe we're quite ready there. But we've been not able to really address the child care center's area calculation. There's some stuff for us to address on that one as far as an opinion directed to us. And then the intent was to also try to include a 2024 code language update to include in our CR 102 filing for 2024 code. So with that, I would like to open up the dwelling unit size conversation. And then, like I said, if we get a quorum, I'll raise my hand and let everybody know. And just right before the meeting, I got a new draft language proposal. Micah and David Neiman were having some offline conversation and I believe made some progress on some code language. So David and Micah, I'm going to promote you guys into panelists so you guys can show us your faces if you so choose. And we can start there. And if you'd like to introduce this one, I'll be happy to share it on screen and get us going on this.
Okay, all right. Thanks for letting us in. Justin, did you just want me to present this new?
Yeah, please go ahead and I should have it opening up any second now. As soon as I get on a meeting, everything starts bogging down on my computer and running slow. But if you want to go ahead and start chatting, it'll pop up on the screen any moment now.
Sure. All right. Well,
Unless you need it
just
to.
as a preamble, I think we've had, some pretty robust discussions of the various issues around room sizes and some of the details of the code. And I have a proposal, Micah has a proposal, and we've been sort of talking about, talking about them at the same time, but haven't really clarified where are the areas of agreement and disagreement. And as the conversation went on, I think it became pretty clear to both Micah and me that we were awfully close in what we were kind of getting at, and it might just be a language thing. So Micah and I met offline. We kind of kicked around some ideas, and we came up with a code proposal that we can both agree achieves what we're all trying to achieve and meets the intent of the legislation, and does so in the most sort of economical way possible in terms of changes to the code. So with this in mind, we have a consensus proposal here for you. It's in my name because Micah is an employee of the city of Seattle, and that's a little tricky to be able to attach his name to this. But Micah can speak to his own thoughts anytime you want. But basically, we've pared down the extent of the changes. We're basically just looking at sections 1208.3 and 1208.4. For 1208.3, we're just proposing to delete it because it's essentially only really talking about efficiency dwelling units, and only really talking about this one dimensional issue. And as you'll see in 1208.4, I think we cover all the nuance of it, and 1208.3 feels kind of redundant. In 1208.4, we're retaining all the basic language of it and the basic size standards that require 120 square feet as the minimum net floor area. And we're simply clarifying that 70 square feet of that area has to be habitable space that is not less than 7 feet in any dimension. And that ensures that this 120 square feet of area, that there is a furnishable room within it, which is the intent of 1208.1. And it also introduces that 70 square feet that is so essential to the language in the National Healthy Housing Standard that makes a link to the spirit of the legislation. And then there's a further clarification that the required habitable space does not include built-ins and equipment and wardrobes and cabinets and so forth. It's probably common sense, but just felt important to make sure that people understood that this is just about clear floor area. So Dustin, if you can just pan down to the diagram below, I think the picture may substitute for my next 1,000 words. So basically, there's a plan of a small unit. That unit is about 200 square feet, just for a total unit size, just for reference. And so this just to describe what the 120 square feet is and what the 70 square feet is. So I'm going to grab my little highlighter here, and so basically the area in yellow, we're saying that this area needs to be a minimum of 120 square feet, and actually that would not include the countertop. So just the area highlighted in yellow, that has to be 120 square feet. And then of that, there has to be a 70 square foot area that meets the dimensional requirements that all of that area is at least 7 feet in dimension, which assures sort of basic furnishability for an area big enough that you can have a bed and a table. So that is the essence of what we are proposing. And Micah, do you have any clarifications on that one or further thoughts?
No, I think you covered that perfectly well for the sections we were looking to address. And for the proposal here, and I know there may be some further discussion on the rest of 1208 or maybe some other sections after this, but I agree with you completely on this package so far. Thanks, David.
All right, sure thing. Anyways, I hope that's at least helpful in sort of deconflicting the testimonies that Micah and I were giving, and at least you may not agree with this proposal, but at least you're not having to choose between Micah and me and figure out what the two of us are talking about and where we differ. So.
I want to say thank you guys, because this basically exemplifies exactly what we were trying to do. I know one of the provisions took out sleeping units, so I see that it's still in there. But if you want to scroll back up to that code language, Dustin, or whoever's leading right now, I can't remember if you gave the controls to Dave.
Not Justin. Dustin got it.
It's me.
Okay, so the only thing that's just a little bit like I'm trying to wrap my head around is we're giving dwelling unit size now within the room area section. In my take on that, anyway, because we're saying every dwelling unit shall have not less than one room that shall be not less than 120 square feet of net floor area. I know that was already in the code. It's black. Then a minimum of 70 square feet a room. Well, I guess you're saying that that's open, so therefore it is all part of the same room. Anyway, that's the only thing is I'm just trying to determine if that's, now that we're trying to calculate this one room area dimension, if we shouldn't leave dwelling unit size and just switch it to 120 square feet of net floor area. And then that way we kind of clearly have the difference between the dwelling unit size and the room area size.
Yeah, the thought was to remove it so as to not make code officials guess as to whether or not those were complementary or if they were supposed to mean different things.
Yeah.
And the essence, the problem we've always had in small unit design is getting code officials to reconcile the concept of the 7-foot minimum dimension with the total area requirement. And the language here is at least clear as to how you do it. There's a total area, and then there's a minimum habitable area. There's a minimum habitable area that has minimum dimensions, and so it's no longer a thing for each individual authority having jurisdiction to figure out what on earth we meant. And so that the thought behind removing 1208.3 was just to get that off the table. We could put repetitive language in 1208.3.
I think where my mind's at is, you're showing this room, the 7-foot minimum dimension either way room. What if you had a pocket door that separated the kitchen hallway area from it? Well, now, by not making it the dwelling unit area, you're saying 120 square feet in one room, but then also a room with 70 square feet of dimensional. I just don't know if we get back to that. But I don't know.
I guess, Tim, on that, what you explained, you wouldn't meet the minimum requirement of the one room having 120 because you're dooring it off.
Yeah.
And we just did, I'm going to kind of add to what David said, and sorry, jump in front of you. We, one of the original proposals we did was suggested was pointing back to 12081 for the 7 and 70 square feet size, but it wasn't clear because you could essentially have areas that may not meet or would have to meet the 70 square foot that doesn't need to meet the 70 square foot. So we were trying to make it clear and pretty clean in this section and not affect much else, because those other areas are not, in reference to the legislation, if that makes any sense. I think that what we came to the conclusion of with this was the cleanest way to do it, and the most effective language for it. Because I think I know what you're saying, but I think we address that by not pointing back to 12081 and keeping it here, because there may be some different design parameters, and I think that's what you were alluding to is design that 12081 may be incorporated on that doesn't have to be incorporated on for this specific space. And maybe that's doesn't make any sense, made sense in my mind, but
As I'm saying it out loud, everything I can think of, I don't think they're going to build these this way. I don't think they're going to try to section off the room, the 7 by 7 room from everything else. In my mind, the intent is, we want to include those other habitable spaces in that room area to get to that 120 square feet plus the bathroom. And so I wasn't sure if that was better expressed as just the dwelling unit sizes, but I think I can get there either way, and I don't think they're going to design it the way that I'm discussing. So I think I'll choose to make it a non-issue and say that I can enforce what I think I need to with your changes, and I think it looks good. I'll put my hand down. Sorry.
Okay. It's
Go ahead,
okay if
Mike.
I talk. I'm just asking you guys this. I really don't like when commentary is put in the code. So to me, the required habitable space and minimum distance shall not include built-in equipment, period. I just hate when they start putting such as, because now what if it's something else that we just haven't thought of? To me, I think the building official and all of us can pretty much make that decision, and the designers, or they could ask us. But then, now it's just one of my pet peeves in the code when you start putting such as and stuff. I'm just throwing that out. I'm fine with all that stuff, but to me, if it was possible, I would just like to crowd house space and minimalist and not include built-in equipment, period. But I don't know if that's going to make if people are all, stuck on the kind of a commentary part in the code. So, did that make sense?
oh yeah, it's been a discussion. That section, that language is actually an interpretation box in Seattle's code, because it's not clear and everybody's inconsistent across the board. And I think even if you just left it at built-in equipment, and I agree with you, Hoyt, I'm not a big fan of the lists either in code, but if you just leave it as built-in equipment, that's going to be like, what is that, and lead to inconsistencies. The thing we want to prevent is if you, in the drawing that David provided, if you took the kitchen cabinets or that cooktop and the sink there and that cabinetry and moved it to the left into that 70 square feet, does that still meet the requirement of the code without clarification that doesn't make net floor area? One thing that we didn't show in this language here is that net floor area in the code for the first sentence of 1284 is italicized, but that isn't clear on excluding built-ins or anything else. So we could either change the definition, which, then what are we getting into there? Or we can provide it here with some guidance that's consistent. That's the direction we went. Again, it's up to the tag if they want that or not, but it's not clear when you just look at net floor area and how you apply it or where you apply it. So this would at least provide a little bit more consistent application.
But if you put a minimum of net floor area of 70 square feet shall be habitable space and not less than 7 feet in any dimension, I think you get that. But that's how I would read it. But maybe it's just me. So But that's fine. I mean, if people want to leave it in, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I'm not going to vote against it just because you have commentary and part of it, but
I think this is one area where it's probably good to put it here because people are going to be designing these small units this way. I don't think it's a concern elsewhere, and it's only applicable to this section, right? So I don't know. I kind of like it just in general because it makes it clear that you don't include those areas when you're getting this close down to the bare minimum, you know? Um, so I think it fits okay here personally, but totally agree. We've worked hard to get it out of everywhere else in the code, and now we're adding it in. I don't know what to tell you.
Joe?
If equipment was defined somewhere, I think it's fine to eliminate that, but otherwise I could see confusion that equipment would include casework or other things that are not what you would necessarily think of as the word equipment would imply. So just for clarity, I like it personally. So just sharing that.
So we can take no official position today, though, Dustin.
Yep, no official position. We could recommend, but we can't make official. So, um, let's, I guess, pull up our topic summary, and then I'd like to, um, does this have any others? This is only for this 12083 and 12084. So looking at our current language, is this proposal proposing that we don't have modifications anywhere else in the 1208 section? Micah?
Yeah, I'll jump on and say, yeah, and that's David's proposal at this point with my support. But yes, that proposal is not suggesting any further changes. We definitely want to leave that open to the tag. I know in a previous proposal I submitted, there was a suggestion, and of course, Dustin, I think you're correct, and we need to go to our topic summary to discuss a few more areas. I'm in agreement on this section. David and I want to leave it open. At least I definitely want to leave it open to eliminating 1208.5. I think that was part of a previous proposal. Again, it's not necessarily relevant any longer. If you're only looking at one room for your dwelling unit anyway, why do you need to provide, at least spell out that if you're doing it in one room, that you now have to provide a separate closet and you have to provide a separate bathroom with those items. Again, if you want to keep those, maybe you just move those up into 1208.4 as far as what, the space has to provide. But efficiency dwelling unit is irrelevant if we go with this language, in my opinion. The other item in 1208.5 that I do want to discuss as a possible addition, whether you keep it or not, if you keep it, it's irrelevant. But if you decide to eliminate 1208.5, is that item 3 there that talks about working space for a kitchen. I think that's really an important item to have and incorporate, especially in just the one room. If you look at 1208.1, you can scroll up just a little bit, Dustin. There is a 36-inch minimum dimension for kitchens if you have a passageway or it's used as a passageway. But there's no required workspace in front of that kitchen unless it's a passageway. So depending on the design, they could go, my kitchen's in a little dead end space down there in the little 50 square foot area on David's floor plan there, and you wouldn't have a passageway, so there would be no minimum in front of your kitchen usable space. Does that make sense? I know I'm trying to explain something that probably be better visually, but that part I think will be important if you did decide to eliminate 12085 in its entirety, is to find a way to incorporate that 30-inch workspace for this particular item.
Awesome. Thank you. So pulling up the topic summary that we have here. There hasn't been much update to this document because of lack of quorum and so on. So I guess the first two up here, do we need any modifications to the definitions, dwelling unit or habitable space as a result? Tim, I see your hand up and your head shaking.
I
Do you
was
have something
answering
else
your
besides
question.
those
No,
definitions?
I had something else that I was going to bring up, but it is a
Okay.
definition.
Well, let's
It's just the definition of a efficiency dwelling unit. If we left all the codes the same for that, the definition of efficiency dwelling unit says when all the things are contained within one room. Um, Basically the design that was shown on the screen in your guys' proposal. So would that still get you to enforcing that 30-inch cooking? Or you would just say, no, it's not an efficiency dwelling unit. So,
I think it
but then you
depends
meet
on
the
the design.
definition. Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing we debated earlier, not earlier, but in a meeting I had or not with David, that talking about how far are we getting into regulating design at that point, and what do you tie those parameters to? That answer, of course, it just depends on the design, Tim. That's the problem. So that's why if we did get rid of the efficiency dwelling, which you don't have to, if you kept it, yeah, you would solve the problem. But if you decided, hey, it's not relevant, but that 30-inch workspace would be, maybe we adjust something, but it all depends on design.
In that case, I like it. So maybe not delete it in this cycle. Just keep the efficiency dwelling unit. Who cares? And how they call it is how they call it. So,
I mean, to be consistent, if the design matches what you guys have, which is, I'm gonna say the vast majority of these that are designed, then it would be captured, right? Because they're all in the one area. So then by meeting the definition of efficiency dwelling unit, those four conditions of it would be applicable. Um, I'm trying to think of if we're overarching in the design, if we, added them to the other section. I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know.
the only thing I add is when they're starting to do the accessibility type A and B dwelling units. That's item 3 on there for the efficiency. That's the thing I like. You don't have that in the other definition that was shown, or unless I missed it. So that would be the only thing that, when you have to get a type A or type B unit that's in there, or especially type A, you got to have that clearance. And if there could be modified to a type B, it could be a type A, you wouldn't have that clearance. So I don't know if people, if building officials or reviewers would miss that.
Go ahead, Micah.
I'm just going to respond to you on that, Hoyt. You technically don't have it now with the dwelling unit, right? You don't have any information on type A, type B. It sends you to another section depending on the number of dwelling units you put in. So that's a struggle part with this. And then the other reason, Tim, I recommended taking 1208.5 out for the most part is if there's no differentiation between a dwelling unit and efficiency dwelling unit, because you can have both in one room now. If somebody says, hey, the dwelling unit is now, and we would consider that an efficiency dwelling unit, you would have to put the closet in, which is extra, right? So I think is what you're indicating, Tim, is if we move that somewhere else, now you're requiring extra because we're going smaller spaces, right? When same with the separated bathroom. I know everybody's like, Mike is crazy. Everybody provides a separated bathroom. It's not required in a dwelling unit. It's required to have one. It's not required to be separate. The efficiency dwelling unit is required to be separate. So again, it's nuance, but that's what you're getting. You're actually requiring extra for the dwelling unit if we move those up. Or if you leave them and somebody goes, oh, all of these are efficiency dwelling units now you gotta have to provide a separate closet, which is again increasing the space, which I think almost defeats the intent of what this whole legislation is about. Lots to think about there.
Alrighty. Tim, did we cover the other item that you wanted to cover?
That was my item, was
Okay,
discussing
the
the
efficiency
efficiency
dwelling unit.
dwelling unit definition and how I think we could still get back to enforcing these things if you wanted to, if the design matched what they showed.
All
Yeah,
right, we
Tim, you
have
could definitely leave it. I
accessibility.
agree with that.
So we have accessibility on here. Or I guess before we get to accessibility, David, I would lean on you as my NHHS expert in the room. Do you know if that document defines efficiency dwelling unit?
No, I don't think it does. It's a very lean document, and
Yeah,
it
I have it to
basically just
pull up, but
says,
I wasn't
yeah,
trying to research on the fly.
yeah. I mean, it talks about the features that should be in a unit that it's which is some of the stuff that's analogous to what's in the efficiency dwelling unit. It says that you should have adequate storage and describes that, and the code the 1208.5 says you should have a closet.
Hey, Dustin, looks like Sean just logged in. How does that work?
I've got a marked that does not get us
Still
across the
doesn't?
quorum line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for attending, Sean.
And I'm sure that the National Healthy Housing Standard it talks a lot about sort of the cleanability and hygiene issues, and so I'd be surprised if there wasn't language in there that recommended that bathing and toilet facilities be separate from kitchens and living rooms. That seems like a pretty basic thing, but
All right. Looking at the accessibility, I believe just recalling the conversations that Chapter 11 governs on this one, and we didn't need to include anything specific in this 1208 section. Is that still the consensus on this one? I see Hoyt nodding. All righty. And then we had some room dimensions as part of this. Is there any desire to alter any of those provisions in 1208?
Well, we already did
Well, we
with the
did,
proposal.
yes. All right.
Nobody said any more. You want to
Any
do
more, yes.
Yeah.
And I think the next couple on here are where you got those covered. The how many rooms needed, we talked about that with the bathroom being, not necessarily required to be separated, but I'll pause. Tim, you have a hand up.
I guess where I was thinking of is that healthy standard living and the presentation that I believe it was Josh Merger kind of gave us, and I think David might have too, is not limiting it to a closet requirement, but they could also use built-ins or like shelving instead.
Yeah.
I just want to open it up. If we want to say that we've evaluated it for all that, maybe we could modify that section of the efficiency dwelling unit to say, 30 square feet of closet or 30 square feet of permanently built-in cabinetry. I don't know how we would word it. Oh, it just says separate closet. So, we could easily say separate closet, or I mean, what is the healthy housing say in regards to the storage area? I know it's much more broad and says you can use shelving or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly. Storage for it talks about storage for things like storage for cookware and utensils and I think in my discussions with Micah I had proposed a bunch of language for it, and Micah had persuaded me to take it out just because it's so difficult to enforce and define, and would lead to a lot of enforcement headaches.
I don't disagree. So if we're all okay with that, I would say leave it exactly the way it is. Otherwise, we just got to get creative on how to word it. I just wanted to bring that up since I knew that was definitely a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm sorry, Tim. I just want to be sure. I think you're saying just eliminate number 2, right? Just get rid of it. Because
No, I was saying if we wanted to include, like, we want them to have a separate area to store things in, and the code works currently as there has to be a separate closet, which we essentially lean on built-in alcoved closet. I don't even know if we would require doors or not. I probably wouldn't, but some people could. But
Yeah, I'll give you my my 2 cents. I think we should delete it. IKEA, you have things you can have like closets that have stuff in it. They could put it in if they want. I've never thought a closet was for an efficiency dwelling unit. You really needed it, or any personally. I mean, you could do what, like what's the size of a closet? They don't tell you what size of closet. You could do a 1 inch closet, let's say. I thought number two was always a dumb thing to have in there, but I mean, excuse
Well,
me, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't have
I
said dumb. Apologize, but
I think it's important, based on every document we've reviewed, that they have separate areas to store things in. This is the way the code deals with it now. And it leaves it open to where you could accept an AMMR or something else to say, oh no, I'm going to do this permanently installed wardrobe or, something else. And you could accept that if you choose to. So I think we're probably good. Maybe I should have never brought it up, but it's just one of those things where if we wanted to have that as a provision, we kind of needed to talk about it and get it put in there now. Otherwise, our jurisdictions are going to be requiring an actual physical built-in full height closet of some sort.
Michael?
I'll throw my 2 cents in here too. I agree with Tim. I think it's good to have it there. And the fact that we don't define what a closet is, it just leaves it to where, it is open to it. It could be a cabinet. It could be something. I think it just needs to be there to reference, hey, there needs to be some place in addition to these other minimum square footages that you have to store personal goods. And I think that line, like it is, does that. So that's my 2 cents worth on it.
Thank you. Che?
Yeah, so two things. What if we just drop the word efficiency and bring these modifications up under 1208.3? And so it is required in every dwelling unit. And as for the closet, the Seattle CDU does have a requirement for a minimum square footage for that, which is, I'm trying to look at it now, 55 cubic feet, which is essentially like a 2 by 7 feet, something like that. So perhaps we should put a size requirement for the closet and bring this requirements up under dwelling unit and eliminate the efficiency dwelling units to avoid the confusion between what is a dwelling unit and what is an efficiency dwelling unit.
I would say, in my opinion, that
Tim?
the confusion is taken care of with the definition of the efficiency dwelling unit. That's how I was getting there. And I mean, we've never had these things under dwelling units before. Yet we've enforced this or more. I just kind of like the way it's structured still.
Yep. So when I am designing a dwelling unit, I can just say this is not an efficiency dwelling unit, therefore I do not need a closet.
Correct.
Or this other.
Unless your efficiency dwelling unit meets the definition of an efficiency dwelling unit, which is all of your spaces are combined in one room. But basically, if you're a studio, you're going to have to comply with 1208.5. That's the way it would enforce it. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Micah?
That's some really good discussion there. I haven't really processed that about moving those up into requiring all dwelling units at that point. I think that may be a little further than the legislation wants to go at this point, but that may be something we could explore in the future, I guess, as a further code change. I do like that idea. It made me think, but Shay, did that kind of give some feedback on that? I had other sections I wanted to go to before we run out of time again. I like that idea though, but I think folks would push back on that pretty heavy because that would be more of a significant shift. Of course, reducing size is a significant shift, but that's legislatively driven without adding increases of spaces that was not part of the legislation. But I do like the idea, and I'm going to add that to my list just for next code cycle. And are we kind of done with it? I think it sounds like the tag is open and leaving 12085 as is for now. If that's the case, I'd like to go on to another topic in your list, Dustin, before we run out of time today. And I don't know if we'll get to a vote since we don't have a quorum.
Well, Michael, you had your hand up. Would you
Yeah.
have something on the 12085?
I
Yeah,
was just gonna throw my support in on Micah's and Shay's concept of combining it. I too think that's a good idea. Not that we're there now, but I just wanted to express that. That's it.
Thank you. All right, Micah.
Yeah, thanks. Can you go back to your well, let's not, you don't have to go back to your list just yet, but one of the things that was brought up that may or not have been discussed here, I think it was part of the CDU rule that Seattle put together requires natural light in these smaller spaces. The healthy housing standard on section 4.3 also indicates that the habitable rooms shall receive daylight. Then it gets into artificial lighting in technically non-habitable spaces. So I do want to point out that yes, that's not that's actually section 1204 of the code. And then in National Healthy Housing Standard, Dustin, it's on page 43, I think, but it says section 4.3. So I wanted to bring that up. That hasn't been talked about much here, but when we are getting into these smaller spaces and talking about aligning with the National Healthy Housing Standard, it's not all about just the size of the room. So this hasn't been discussed here at this level. My understanding, though, is there was a national level proposal this cycle to require natural light in habitable spaces also, that and moving away from the exception for artificial lighting in some of these spaces. So if we're talking about full alignment here and going lots smaller in size, I think the tag should consider looking at requiring natural light and removing the allowable exception for artificial light in the habitable space. That's my first point of discussion. And I got one more. I'll throw that on the table and let people think about it for a minute, and they got some discussion on it. Great.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with you, Micah. Natural light is a big thing that's been around, and I think we should keep natural light when we're starting to get to these really small spaces like you're talking about. So
might be considered a bright idea.
Dad joke for the day. Way to go, Dustin. Anyway, that's definitely something I think we need to explore before the next meeting, or maybe before you all vote on it. If you vote on it today, if somebody jumps on in the next 15 minutes. Second point, if Dustin, that I want to make, if we can go back to, and this is going to definitely open up a can of worms for discussion that we've already talked about multiple times, and that's our what is the difference at this point based on, if you go with the proposal that David put it forward that I agree with, and that floor design, what becomes the difference between a sleeping unit and a dwelling unit in this instance? And that's on our relevance list. It's farther down. I think if you scroll down, it's the last one on the list. Yeah, the difference between sleeping and dwelling unit. So when you look at the two definitions, obviously a dwelling unit has 4 components, and it comes down to the cooking and sanitation components is the difference between that and the sleeping unit. You can have one or the other in the sleeping unit, not both, where the dwelling unit will have both within that space. So at this point in our design, if you went back to the floor plan David provided, maybe it'll help you with the what if that I'll throw out here. If you removed the cooktop, the permanent cooktop that David's shown in that design, that would be classified as a sleeping unit at that point. And so that gets into the point of what is the tag? Are you going to specify, or are you just going to accept what your jurisdiction currently accepts for a permanent cooking facility? So if that cooktop David's shown in that picture is permanent, are you good with that? Or if that's a microwave or a hot plate, are you still good with that? If it's just a hot plate, there's a lot of folks who are going to say that's not a dwelling unit, doesn't meet a dwelling unit at all. It's only a sleeping unit. There's other folks that will allow that. I will admit that Seattle's CDU rule allows for a microwave to be that. So throwing that out there, I think that really, really needs to be solved. Maybe not solved, but heavily discussed at the tag with some guidance, because that will be it's inconsistent now, and it's going to get even worse when we start talking about smaller spaces and the size difference between the differentiation between a sleeping unit and a dwelling unit. I see hands up and open for discussion.
Yeah, I'm just that was on my last thing on the list. Exactly what you said, Micah, is how are we going to find a cooking area? Because you also got venting issues you got to deal with a cooking area too. So you got some of the design restraints. I'm now going to give you my personal opinion. I think nowadays a microwave could meet that requirement if if they have it in a microwave. I also think a lot of these small units, they're cheaper, inexpensive. It's a great way to start out someone that's young, that's just getting going. They eat out a lot and things like that. I think they're designed in that way. So my personal opinion, I think a microwave could meet that criteria. And I do think we should at least have that in the code that says that would be allowed, so people would allow that. But
Thanks, Hoyt. Anybody else? It's all quiet. No hands up. All right. I guess we'll have
people
to figure.
disagree or agree. I mean, is there anyone in the opposite opinion?
I mean, me personally, I do agree with your personal statement, Hoyt, that a microwave can serve that purpose. There's a lot of prepackaged foods designed to be cooked in the microwave, and you know, not everybody is going to be cooking on the stovetop, or my kids in particular even know how to cook on the stovetop, it seems like. But um, you know, it can boil water for use that way, and a lot of stuff. That's all you really need to worry about. But yeah. I guess the one thing we haven't chatted on today is reference standards. Are there any reference standards that we need to be aware of? Should we reference the NHHS or anything else as a part of this consideration, Micah?
Sorry, I wasn't over the last topic, Dustin. That's a
Oh,
good one
sorry.
to
Go
maybe
ahead.
end on. I guess my question is going to stick with this differentiation. Are we breaking other sections of the code? I.e., I'm pretty sure you can't have multiple sleeping units and consider that a dwelling unit. So now is that, if there's no differentiation, how are we going to address other parts of the code on that? So that's kind of my concern. That's why I'm really going to push on this guidance over and over from the tag, because I think if we don't have that, and this is that small, and the tag is okay with a microwave, that we're breaking a lot of other sections of the code, and maybe even some of the occupancy classification in the building code. So I think we really need to evaluate that further. And maybe it's just me on a bone here, but hopefully others will weigh in. But I think we're breaking stuff.
Patrick.
Yeah, can't believe I'm coming in on this side of this, but I think requiring at least like a one or two burner stovetop is good. Because then if you don't have that, I feel like you're more of getting into the sleeping unit category, which the idea is you have a shared kitchen that people can access. Yeah, you can cook a lot with microwaves, and there's air fryers, and there's all kinds of stuff that you can plug in and do it, but I don't think they quite serve the same purpose that even a single burner stove top can do. And it's a little bit safer having that installed versus if somebody's trying to do like a camp stove or something to make do. And I think nowadays a lot of people are trying to cook more for health reasons to save money. And so there's a lot of ways that we can reduce cost and just provide the bare minimum. But I think having at least one or two burners is good.
Joe.
Yeah, I had the exact same thought that Patrick had, and also, yeah, I mean, cooking is a life skill, so having access to that type of equipment, I think, is important. So yeah, I would just seconding Patrick's comments.
Micah.
What I'm hearing is I think you all want to stick with the definition that in dwelling unit it says that it includes permanent provisions for cooking, and that not a microwave wouldn't necessarily meet the permanent provisions if it's a plug-in type appliance. I guess maybe a microwave would work if you hard mounted it like they used to over the over the stove as a cabinet. Maybe Angela, it looked like is that what you're going to say? And so maybe the microwave will work, but and I, as what I'm getting at is maybe you all are saying we should lean on permanent and leave permanent open to interpretation on how that's accomplished. Is that what you're going to say, Angela?
I was just going to mention the microwave situation. I mean, the hard part about this is that as soon as you require, which it is now, the cooktop, like Patrick's talking about, you have to put a hood, which means you also have to vent to the outside. So we hit the issue recently where King County changed a hotel into an apartment complex, and it almost killed the project because running new hoods out of every single unit was a structural issue. And the energy code, because I mean, with all of the penetrations it requires out of walls, and you don't have shafts in place. If this is strictly talking about retrofitting in, but I mean, this is where this came up for us is it worth, when you're talking about housing affordability, killing projects for two burners? But sorry, I'm new here, so I'm trying to keep quiet.
Wow, you're not new here.
Patrick.
I don't think she should get to use the new here excuse. I don't think that counts. I'll object to that.
Agreed.
Isn't in that situation, couldn't they do it like, couldn't they turn the rooms into like sleeping units and then have shared kitchens?
Yes, but when you are talking about affordable housing and providing equal housing for low income, it's also about not trying to cut corners, and we're trying to give them the same experience as other people have, or the availability of it. So yeah, I mean, I've done buildings even before this affordable housing became a thing where there's a common kitchen at the end of the hall. They're more designed like dorms, things like that. But in these situations where they're trying to do it, a lot of times they want to create independent living situations, and for that to be, it would be individual kitchens. So I mean, I'm just pointing out what the additional requirement is with the cooktop.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think if it were me, I would look at changing the energy code and the ventilation requirements, but that might be opening up a larger can than we want to tackle here.
The hood is not an energy code requirement. It's a mechanical code.
But doesn't if you're venting to outside, then you're dealing with the envelope penetration, so then you get into the energy code. Yeah. It's like the reverse if you give a mouse a cookie.
Yep. And we don't want to mess with the energy code. This tag would never end. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Energy code's great. I guess kind of a question with this and this tag, do you all want to put some type of minimum, and thank you, Patrick, for being supportive of something. I was really surprised at that too, but at least supportive of the cooktop of some requirement. But do we want to include something in, I don't know if it even be appropriate in chapter 12, but maybe it is. I don't know, because it's giving some dwelling unit requirements, but something about permanent cooking, because I mean, as everybody knows, technically definitions aren't enforceable, so it's an interpretation item by individual jurisdictions, and maybe how that applies in certain instances throughout the code. Just throwing that out there do we want, it's not that we have to adopt it, but does this tag want to suggest something like that clarifies in these spaces that you got to provide something? And I don't know what that looks like. I'm just asking the question because that's going to come up. We get told that quite often, that definitions aren't enforceable. It's just informational, things like that. So, and there's nothing right now, I think, in the code that says the cooking requirement is permanent other than in the definition. Thanks.
Gotcha. So we're at time. I got a meeting right at 2. If we could have some closing remarks from Hoyt and then Sean, and then we'll have to close this one down.
Yeah, I would say to Micah, no, we don't need a definition for it. I would not like one. I'd like to be able to make that interpretation myself. So.
Sean?
And then back on the cooking appliance, looking back on efficiency dwelling units number 3, it does just state cooking appliance. So that could be any listed labeled appliance for cooking, as it's written.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's thoughts and dedication to this one. I'd say be on the lookout for a poll to maybe switch the time and day to make sure we can get a quorum so we can make some official actions on this. I think we're approaching that nexus where this will get moved on to the committees. But we need to have a full group here able to make that motion. So thank you everybody for your time, and we will see you at the next meeting, and we'll advertise that once we get a good poll result.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks all.